The old beggar did not appear like ordinary homeless people. He did not wander the streets aimlessly, nor did he beg from anyone who happened to pass by. Instead, his presence followed a disturbing pattern, precise, repetitive, and unnervingly deliberate. Every morning, without exception, he appeared at exactly the same time. Not earlier, not later, as if guided by an invisible clock that only he could hear. His destination was always the same: the front doors of a few specific households. He never knocked on random doors. He never changed his route. It was as though those houses had already been chosen long before his arrival. When he begged, he asked for only one thing: not food, not water, not shelter, just one coin, never more, never less. No matter how wealthy the house was, no matter how poor, he never asked for more than a single unit of money. The request itself felt symbolic, almost ritualistic, as if the value of the coin mattered less than what it represented. Even stranger was the fact that he never spoke. He did not form words. He did not explain himself. From his mouth came only low, broken murmurs, indistinct sounds that resembled neither language nor plea. It was not the silence of weakness, but the silence of something that no longer needed to speak. At first glance, he appeared to be a harmless old beggar, but the more one observed him, the clearer it became. This was not the behavior of a living man. His rigid schedule, his selective visibility, his refusal to speak, his fixation on a single coin, all of these were signs that pointed to one unsettling conclusion: the old beggar was not among the living. If the beggar's appearance was unsettling, his behavior after receiving money was outright terrifying. He never spent the coins he was given, not on food, not on clothing, not on shelter. Instead, after collecting the money, he would retreat to an empty corner where no one was watching and begin his rituals. Paper money was burned, not casually discarded, but carefully set alight, as if following a strict procedure. He watched the flames consume the paper until nothing remained but ash. Metal coins were treated even more disturbingly. He drilled a hole through each coin with deliberate precision. Then, placing the coin on the ground, he would light a stick of incense and insert it through the hole, letting the smoke rise slowly into the air. This was not random madness. This was not the act of a delusional old man. These actions mirrored funerary rites. In traditional belief, burning paper money is an offering to the dead. Incense is used to guide spirits. A pierced coin is no longer currency. It becomes a marker, a seal, a symbol of ownership. In this ritual, money no longer represented wealth. Money became life itself. Each coin was a life marked. Each flame was a transaction. Each stick of incense was a signal sent to the unseen world. This was not begging. This was sacrifice. The first death came quietly, but it carried the unmistakable scent of warning. The woman who sold goods on the ground floor was found burned alive inside her own home. The fire spread with terrifying speed, consuming everything before firefighters could arrive. By the time the flames were extinguished, nothing remained. No furniture, no possessions, no chance of survival. It was ruled an accident, but the details told a different story. In the days leading up to her death, her behavior had changed. She became restless. Her mind seemed unstable. At night, she was seen burning paper money inside her home. Not large sums, not stacks of offerings, just one-unit bills, again and again. The same denomination she had given to the old beggar, the same paper money he had burned himself. The parallel was impossible to ignore. The old beggar burned her money in secret. She burned the same kind of money in her own home. And then she burned with it. This was not coincidence. This was synchronization, a ritual completed on both sides of the living and the dead. The second death erased any remaining doubt. Wang, the butcher who lived upstairs, was found dead along with his entire family. According to official reports, he had suffered a mental breakdown. In a fit of madness, he killed his wife, his child, and his relatives before turning the knife on himself. But the scene told a darker truth. Beside every corpse lay the same object, a metal coin with a hole drilled through its center. And beside each coin, a stick of incense, burned or burning. These were not decorations, they were markers. Wang had not simply killed his family. He had performed a ritual. The incense, the pierced coins, the exact arrangement. They perfectly matched the actions of the old beggar. This revealed a horrifying reality. The debt collector did not kill with his own hands. He controlled. He entered the minds of his victims, twisted their actions, and forced them to complete the ritual themselves. The victims became both the sacrifice and the executioner. The old beggar never spilled blood. He never set fire to a house. He never raised a knife. He only came to collect what had already been claimed. Life, once marked, would end by its own hand. With 2 deaths, the pattern was complete. 1 coin, 3 days, fire or blood, incense and pierced money. The old beggar was not a murderer. He was a harvester, a servant of a deeper force. And now only 1 marked life remained. After the deaths of the shopkeeper and Wang the butcher, fear settled over the building like a thick fog. Neighbors whispered. Doors were locked earlier. People avoided eye contact, afraid that even curiosity might invite misfortune. The narrator believed he was safe. He had given the old beggar nothing. He had not spoken to him. He had not acknowledged his existence. At least, that was what he told himself. Then one morning, as he reached into his pocket, he felt something unfamiliar, a coin. He did not remember placing it there. It was old, cold to the touch, heavier than it should have been. When he pulled it out, his breath caught in his throat. A small hole had been drilled cleanly through its center. The same kind of coin, the same mark. At that moment, the truth became unavoidable. You did not have to give the coin willingly. You did not have to speak to the beggar. Once you were seen, once you were chosen, the mark would find its way to you. From that day on, strange things began to happen. At night, he dreamed of fire, of incense smoke curling into the ceiling, of hands that were not his own striking matches. He would wake up with ashes on his fingers, and sometimes he would wake up standing before a bowl of burning paper money he had no memory of lighting. He was not dreaming. He was being used. Panic drove him to action. He moved out of the building overnight, leaving behind furniture, clothes, and anything that might slow him down. He believed distance might break the connection, that if the beggar could not find him, the ritual would fail. It did not. On the first night in his new apartment, he woke up to the smell of smoke. Paper money burned in the sink. 1 unit, again. He bought a Buddha statue and placed it at the center of the room. He wore talismans, carried charms, whispered prayers he barely understood. None of it worked. The incense still burned. The dreams continued. And the coin, no matter how many times he threw it away, always returned. Each morning it lay in his pocket. Each night it felt heavier, as if his life itself was being compressed into metal. Desperation finally led him to his uncle, a man rumored to understand matters of the unseen world. After listening in silence, the old man's expression hardened. "The beggar is not human," he said. "He is a debt collector." According to ancient belief, such spirits do not kill directly. They collect lives that have already been assigned to them. Their appearance is not random. Only those whose names have been written can see them. That explained everything. Why only certain people noticed the beggar. Why he appeared at precise times. Why no amount of prayer could drive him away. But the most disturbing truth came next. "The beggar does not decide who dies," the uncle continued. "He is only a messenger." Someone else was controlling the process. Someone who understood rituals. Someone who knew how to bind life to currency. Someone who turned ordinary people into walking sacrifices. The beggar was merely the hand that knocked on the door. There was only one way out. To counter a debt collector, one must summon something stronger. Something that could seize control of the ritual and overwrite the claim. The uncle warned him repeatedly. "This path saves lives," he said, "but it destroys the land it touches." They prepared the ceremony in secret, far from the city. But something went wrong. The spirit that answered their call was not what they expected. It was not a minor guardian, not a wandering soul. It was something older, heavier. The air turned suffocating. Plants within 100 meters withered overnight. Animals refused to approach the site. They had summoned a living judge of the underworld, a force that even debt collectors feared. At first, it worked. The beggar stopped appearing. The incense no longer burned at night. The coin felt lighter, but relief did not last, because this new presence did not leave. It stayed, watching, waiting. And somewhere beneath the ground, a grave began to form, with the name of a living man carved into stone. The debt had not been erased, it had only been transferred. And the price now would be far greater. At first, the narrator believed the worst had passed. The beggar was gone. The incense no longer burned in his dreams. The coin no longer felt like a weight pressing against his chest. But peace, when it comes too suddenly, is often a warning. The land around the ritual site began to change. Trees that had stood for decades withered within days. Their leaves curled inward, blackened at the edges, as if scorched by an invisible flame. Birds avoided the area entirely. Even insects disappeared. The silence was not natural. It was enforced. The uncle understood immediately. "What you summoned did not come to help," he said. "It came to stay." This was no longer a matter of escaping death. It was a matter of surviving something worse. The spirit they had called the living judge of the underworld did not simply remove claims. It rewrote them. It absorbed existing curses and replaced them with its own law. And that law demanded balance. Soon, strange rumors began circulating. A grave had appeared overnight on a nearby hillside. No one had seen it being dug. No tools were found nearby. The tombstone was clean, new, and carved into the stone was a name, the narrator's name. In ancient belief, a grave prepared for the living is the most complete form of spiritual execution. A living grave, a shungfen, is not meant to kill immediately. It is meant to drain. Every stick of incense burned at such a grave shortens the lifespan of the person whose name it bears. Every offering strengthens the bond between the living soul and the underworld. The most cruel part? Destroying the grave kills the owner instantly. Running away does nothing. Ignoring it only accelerates the process. The narrator stood before the grave at dawn, staring at his own name etched into stone, and understood the truth. The first debt collector had marked him for death. The second force had sealed it. This was no longer a curse. This was a contract. The uncle finally revealed what he had feared all along. The beggar, he said, was never the greatest danger. Debt collectors can be negotiated with. They follow rules. They answer to higher authority. But what they had summoned did not collect debts. It enforced judgment. And judgment does not bargain. Worse still, the entire sequence, the beggar, the deaths, the rituals, even the failed countermeasure, had been guided. Someone had engineered the path, someone who understood not only spirits, but human desperation. Someone who knew that fear would drive the narrator to seek forbidden solutions. This was a layered trap. First, fear, then false hope, finally irreversible binding, a death within a death. They consulted others, ritualists, monks, scholars of forbidden texts. The answers were all the same. The living grave could not be removed. The judge could not be dismissed. The contract could not be broken. The only thing that could change its outcome was substitution. A binding strong enough that the judge would no longer have jurisdiction. A bond older than death itself. The uncle spoke the final solution quietly, as if afraid the words themselves might awaken something. An underworld marriage, a union not between two living souls, but between the living and the dead. By binding his fate to a single spirit, the narrator would remove himself from the general cycle of judgment. The debt collector would lose his claim. The living grave would no longer apply, but survival would come at a cost that could never be repaid. No marriage in life, no children, no ordinary future. His life would continue, but never fully belong to the living world again. He would walk, speak, work, and breathe like everyone else. But his shadow would always follow a different set of laws. Standing between the grave and the rising sun, the narrator understood something far worse than fear. Death had offered him a choice, not between life and death, but between existence and belonging. And whatever he chose next would echo beyond his own lifetime. The ceremony was held just before dawn, not because dawn was sacred, but because it was the moment when neither night nor day held full authority. A time when the living and the dead could briefly share the same breath. No guests were invited, no witnesses were allowed. Only the uncle, the narrator, and the empty space beside him, where his bride would stand. She never appeared in flesh. Her presence was felt instead. A sudden drop in temperature, a pressure behind the eyes, the faint scent of old incense drifting through the air. The ground beneath their feet vibrated, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of something ancient acknowledging a completed vow. There were no vows spoken aloud, only names were exchanged. In underworld law, names are stronger than promises. When the ritual ended, the wind stopped, the incense extinguished itself. And for the first time since the nightmare began, silence returned. Not the suffocating silence of judgment, but the calm of a closed ledger. The living grave collapsed that same morning. The stone cracked, the name faded, the earth swallowed its own trap. The judge withdrew, the debt collector vanished, the contract was fulfilled. Life continued. That was the cruelest part. The narrator did not die. He aged, he worked, he walked through crowds like any other man. But something fundamental had changed. He could no longer cross certain thresholds at night. Mirrors sometimes reflected more than one shadow. And on cold evenings, when the world grew quiet, he could feel someone standing just behind him, close enough to breathe, too close to turn around. He never married. Every attempt ended the same way. Sudden illness, accidents narrowly avoided, a pressure in the chest that warned him not to take another step. The bond held, not violently, not cruelly, but absolutely. He had escaped death by surrendering belonging. He was alive, but no longer fully part of the human world. His fate had been rewritten, not erased, and perhaps that was the final lesson. Some debts cannot be paid with repentance, some curses cannot be outrun, and some survivals demand a price greater than death itself. The underworld does not always take lives. Sometimes it takes futures. If this story unsettled you, that is because it was never meant to comfort. Stories like this exist to remind us that choices, especially the small, careless ones, can echo far beyond what we see, and that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed without consequence. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of forbidden rituals, unseen debts, and the thin line between the living and the dead, then stay with this channel. Subscribe, follow, and listen carefully, because not every story ends when the video does. Some continue waiting.